hoping this works. All right. Looks like we're live there. Should be.
Oh, do I need to admit?
No, I can. I can. I can
Well,
handle
I
that.
just clicked on it, so. Oh
Okay.
no.
Oh, that's okay.
Carried away by it all, this girl follows the romantic statue.
So it looks like we're live on YouTube at least. Hopefully live on Facebook as well. We'll wait a few minutes until 7 o'clock, and then I will go ahead and do a little bit of an intro, very very simple stuff to start with. Um,
Okay.
if it's okay with you, I will let people put questions in the chat, and I can maybe pop those in from time to time if there is a question, or would you like us to wait
Okay.
until the end?
Um, as long as we don't get cut off in time, I'm okay. If it's something directly to what I've just said, if your chat works that quickly,
Mhm.
um, um, then you can break in. As long as I get to finish.
Sure, sure, definitely. Definitely. Okay, well, it is 7 o'clock, so I say we go ahead and get started. And as other people arrive, I will let them in, and we will they will catch up. Um, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming this evening to this third of four presentations by the Opera Theater of St. Louis on their festival season this year. So previously, we've had docents talking about Harvey Milk and Awakenings, and tonight we have docent Diane McCullough, who will be discussing the classic Carmen, and I can't wait to hear about this. A few housekeeping things this evening. What I'll have you do is if you have a question for Diane, please feel free to put it in the chat. I am going to ask that everyone stay muted unless you are actually speaking, just to keep out the background noise and that sort of thing. I will be muting myself as well because I've got a dog in the next room over, so and nobody wants to hear him. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Diane. Thank you so much for being here, and let's hear about Carmen.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I am a docent for Opera Theater of St. Louis. I'm also a musician and a retired music teacher who worked with Opera Theater as a cooperating teacher for the last 20 years of my teaching in the St. Louis Public Schools. So I'm a dedicated opera theater lover, and I'm thrilled that University City is broadcasting our presentations. So, without further ado, let us begin. Carmen, as a personality, has fascinated generations of opera lovers, but the fascination hasn't stopped there. Feminists, social activists, and other composers have been inspired to create their own versions of this dynamic character. This talk will explore the bearing social norms have had on this character from Bizet's own time to the present. I want to acknowledge my primary sources, two women who influenced my thinking on this piece, Ellen H. Bleiler and Naomi Andre, PhD. Bleiler, who just passed away in 2021, was a Renaissance woman who was fluent in at least 5 languages and is famous for her opera libretti translations. Her book on Carmen includes extensive descriptions of Bizet's milieu, including his family background and influence. Andre is associate professor in the departments of African and Afro-American Studies and Women's Studies, and associate director in the residential college at the University of Michigan. In her book, Black Opera, she explains, quote, "I am interested in what audiences today see and the connections they can draw to recent and current historical events. This method of inquiry incorporates the shared lived experiences of everyone involved, the performers and the public. Such an approach that brings together opera in a historical context and focuses on how it resonates in the present day points to a type of analysis I call an engaged musicology," end quote. Dr. Andre worked with Opera Theater last year to curate and moderate 2 valuable and enlightening panel discussions presenting Black composers, singers, and administrators and their views on equity within the opera world. Georges Bizet, born October 25, 1838, and died June 2, 1875, came from a musical family that was also influential in the artistic community in France. After moving to Paris, his father, Adolphe Bizet, had become a voice teacher and opera coach. His mother was from the Delsarte family, who, besides Francois Delsarte, her famous singing brother, also claimed a distant Spanish family connection. They were well known to Malibran and Viardot, two of the most famous singers of their time. And Malibran and Viardot were sisters, about 13 years apart. Malibran died, though, very young, but they were considered really fabulous interpreters, as well as having really great voices. To be a successful musician, it was important to study at the Paris Conservatory. Quote, when George was 9, and I must say, the quotes in this section are from the Bleiler book. When George was 9, the Bizets and Delsarts started to pull strings in the musical world, and George was examined for admission. He passed his interviews brilliantly. He performed spectacularly on the piano, of which he was already an excellent player, and he demonstrated his gift of absolute pitch and his knowledge of harmony by first identifying complex chords that were played for him and then discussing their function in music. And remember, he was only 9. Fromental Olivier in the slide was his main teacher, and he became friends with Charles Gounod when he was at the conservatory. During his conservatory years, Bizet won several prizes and composed songs, piano pieces, and opera bouffe, and a symphony in C, written at the age of 17. At 18, he won a composition prize offered by Jacques Offenbach, after which he became a regular guest at Offenbach's parties. Here he met Rossini and many other important musicians. His last year, he won the Prix de Rome, which took him to Rome for further study. By this time, he was showing signs of his independence and resistance to the traditional pathway of becoming a famous musician. Instead of writing the required religious piece at the end of his first year, he wrote a well-received opera bouffe, which is a comic opera, entitled Don Procopio, another old man guardian in charge of the marriage of his niece, in the vein of Donizetti and Rossini. Ellen Bleiler describes Bizet's innovations this way, quote, in his best work, like Carmen, he is sparse, economical, vigorous, and original. He seems to have been one of the few composers who have had a special predilection for the wind instruments. Bizet's strongest point, apart from his technical skills in harmony and orchestration, is his truly remarkable dramatic and coloring ability. It is sometimes almost incomprehensible how his music, by means of a few notes upon unexpected instruments, can evoke whole landscapes, create characters, indicate mood, and even communicate more specific matters. In his youth, Bizet occasionally used this remarkable gift to amuse his friends with his tour de force, the musical newspaper. He would place a newspaper upon his music rack and extemporize, creating such an incredible synesthesia that his listeners knew well what he was saying. In this area of color and dramatics, Bizet has seldom, if ever, been excelled. We're going to listen to an excellent example of this from the introduction to Act 4. in Italy, Bizet traveled widely with his friend Ernest Guiraud, who would set the recitatives for the grand opera version of Carmen after Bizet's death. Bizet died only a couple of months after the opening of Carmen. Bizet's knowledge of and appreciation for literature and art, quote, made him one of the best-rounded of French musicians. His enthusiasm, intelligence, and bonhomie made him some firm friends, while his impatience, excitability, disdain for time-serving, and sharp tongue made him permanent enemies, end quote. During this time, he also mastered many scores and was especially interested in both Mozart and Verdi, both of whom are noted for their use of wind instruments in their orchestrations. He was known for being able to read an orchestral score at sight and was hired to write the piano reductions of works by other composers. In 1860, Bizet returned to Paris. Although he had made the commitment to be a composer, Bizet continued to be well known as a pianist. At a reception for Liszt in 1861, his composition teacher at the conservatory, Fromental Olivier, encouraged Bizet to demonstrate just how gifted he was. Liszt had played one of his extremely difficult piano pieces and claimed that only he and Hans von Bülow were capable of playing it. Olivier turned to Bizet and asked if he could recall a difficult passage. Bizet, having grasped it by ear, sat down and played it perfectly. Liszt acknowledged that now there were 3 pianists capable of playing the work, and then Bizet sight-read the complete piece perfectly. End quote. Despite all of his connections, the 1860s proved to be disappointing for Bizet, as his operatic efforts met with little success. It was during this time that The Pearl Fishers was produced with some audience success, but without financial success or good critical review. The artistic milieu in Paris during this time included the most famous musicians of the time. One of the competitions that Bizet entered had a panel of judges that included Auber, Thomas, Verdi, Théophile Gautier, Rossini, and Berlioz. Losing most of these competitions kept Bizet on the fringes of success. So if you can imagine a young composer sending in material to this group of very earnest, serious gentlemen, pretty awe-inspiring. In 1869, he married Geneviève, the daughter of his mentor, Fromental Olivier, but this would prove an unhappy marriage. Then in July 1870, the Franco-Prussian War broke out, followed by civil war. Quote, when peace came and musical life arose again in Paris, the artistic situation was very different from earlier days. The musical temper had changed, and Offenbach's frothy satire was no longer in favor. End quote. In spite of this, the Opera Comique, now under the direction of Camille Duloc and Adolphe de Louvain, commissioned Bizet to write a one-act comic opera based on an Arabian Nights tale. Although this too was a financial failure, critics liked it, thinking it showed real growth in Bizet's music. This is the Opera Comique today, and then. Duloc and de Louvain Duloc and de Louvain showed their faith and satisfaction by authorizing Bizet to work on a 3-act opera, the libretto to be provided by Ludovic Olivier and Henri Meilhac. Now, both de Louvain and Duloc were librettists themselves, and on the right there's the cover of the French version of Verdi's Don Carlos. Duloc was one of the French librettists for that opera, which was very popular in France. So, Ludovic Halévy and Henri Meilhac, their libretto was based on the 1835 book by Prosper Mérimée. Although the Mérimée novel was considered a classic, performing such a story at the Opéra Comique, considered a family theater, was thought by the directors to be too risque, even dangerously scandalous. Quote, "There had never been a death in an opera comique and never a brothel. The librettist promised to sanitize Carmen, but de Louvain was not convinced, and early in 1874, he sold his share of the Opéra Comique to Duloc and left in protest." End quote. The original Carmen by Prosper Mérimée had been accepted as a modern classic by this time, but there seems to have been no immediate reason that it should have been selected as material for a libretto. Perhaps Bizet and his librettists wanted to make capital out of Bizet's remarkable skill at creating musical landscapes and his melodies, harmonies, and devices of orchestration that evoked all the flavor and strangeness of other lands and times. Let's listen to the Mischievous Quintet from Act 2, the Gypsy Quintet, as a good example of this. This, again, is from the Wiener Staatsoper production under the direction of Andres Nelsons. And on the left, you'll see the text and the list of the performers' names.
Tutto tresciò. Sapevo sapere qui da te. E di modi ti ruba, e le farmi la scena. Mais nous savons besoin de vous. Et nous savons besoin de vous. De vous, de vous, de vous, de vous, de vous, de vous, de vous.
It was this ability that enabled Bizet to create the coloring that makes Carmen the great Spanish opera, even though Bizet had never been to Spain, knew very little about Spanish music, and used only a few Spanish sources in Carmen. End quote. Bizet was sensitive to the wishes of his singers, in particular Marie Celestine Galli-Marie, who premiered the role of Carmen. After rewriting the habanera 13 times, he gave up and adapted Sebastián Iradié's song El Arreglito. Other influences may be the songs of Manuel Garcia, father of Malibran and Viardot, mentioned earlier. Galli-Marie was a great supporter of Bizet and of this opera, and was apparently fearless in her interpretation of Carmen, adding to the sensationalism of the story. So in the center is Sebastián Iradié. The next section is called The Story and Music, and this section is entirely taken from Naomi Andre's book, Black Opera, from pages 123 to 127. And she entitles this section, Challenging the Conventions, Gendered Relationships in Carmen. And I am just directly quoting her because her descriptions of the music and the way the music develops the characters just can't be surpassed. So I want to give her full credit on the next section. Bizet's opera delineated the different worlds that men and women inhabit. Central to this mission is the addition of the characters of Micaela and Escamillo, neither is in the Merimée novella, who help articulate the norms for gender relations. Escamillo is a composite character of the men Carmen has seduced, and he provides a compelling rival to Don José for Carmen by the end of the opera. As a toreador with a booming bass voice, Escamillo easily captivates the audience with his brash virility in the bull ring, described in his famous, rousing entrance number, the Toreador Song. He is a logical choice for Carmen, as is seen in their short duet in the final act. Their music is well matched as they effortlessly sing of their love for each other. Micaela provides an important model of femininity that reflects the expectations of the opera comique's audience and conventions of late 19th century womanhood. Whereas Carmen is brazen and acts according to her own code of ethics and desires, Micaela shows us the woman with whom Don José should fall in love. A sincere girl from his village, approved of by his mother, Micaela is demure and shy. She gets nervous with the attentions from the military officers when she first looks for Don José in the beginning of the opera. Later in the act, when she is finally reunited with her beloved, she is hardly able to voice her true feelings without filtering them through her role as a messenger from his mother. Yet Micaela is not a weak character, for she ventures into the mountains to find Don José in the third act, after he has left her and the military to follow Carmen and her band of smugglers. Micaela shows courage as she tells José that his dying mother wishes to see him. More than any other character, Micaela demonstrates a noble honor in the face of adversity. This is Anna Netrebko in the Wiener Staatsoper production, and she's just incredible in this role. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. That's just gives me chills every time I hear it. Rather than the notorious bandit in Mérimée novella, in the beginning of the opera, Don José is perfectly poised to marry Micaela and live an honorable life. Bizet's Don José has been softened from being a dangerous outlaw in his own right to being a military corporal trying to abide by the rules and advance. One of the key conflicts in the opera is the progression of Don José from a respectable character to an obsessed, half-crazed stalker who loses control. In this segment, you'll hear Grace Bumbry singing part of the habanera, but it's to show you John Vickers is just ignoring her in the beginning of the opera. In Bizet's opera, we see how the traditional codes of masculinity go askew after Don José encounters Carmen. Hardly even noticing her during her habanera, as soon as Carmen sets her sights on Don José, he becomes increasingly unable to resist her demands and charms, even after he dramatically declares his love to her in his earnest and lyrical second act flower song. Now, he, as a character, has had a violent past. And in this scene, they have just had a huge argument. And he just about hits her in this production. And then he goes into his love song to her. Carmen immediately challenges him to prove this love by running off to the mountains with her to live the life of a bandit. Though he initially declines, the circumstances that arise by the end of the act compel him to follow her lead and give up the life he had intended to follow in the military. In the fourth act, after things have gone awry and Carmen has moved on to Escamillo, Don José implores Carmen to remember the good times they had together and begs her not to leave him. As she harshly tells him to leave her alone, the traditional gender dynamics in the relationship are reversed. Though Carmen tries to end the relationship, a nearly hysterical Don José uses every argument he can think of to make her stay. He wants to start a fresh life together with her. He wants to save her and save himself. He still loves her. When she refuses him at each point and says she no longer loves him, his desperation comes through most poignantly when he agrees to remain a bandit and do whatever she wants. He repeatedly pleads with her, "Do not leave me. Mais ne me quitte pas." With the crowds in the background cheering on Escamillo, Don José takes action and does the only thing he sees possible. Rather than let Carmen go, he turns her into the victim and brutally stabs her. With the ultimate metaphor of rape and domination, Don José seals his own doom. He has become the worst exaggeration of what he feared most in Carmen, in her code to stay true to herself. Unlike Carmen's independence, wherein she allows everyone, and most important herself, to make up one's own mind despite pressure to heed convention, Don José has lost control of his actions and his inner sense of justice. Proceeding without a moral compass, he snuffs out the one thing he thinks he loves and effectively kills his own desire to move forward. His final words, which conclude the opera, show his capitulation to the authority he had just disregarded and his consequent admission of guilt. Vous pouvez m'arrêter, c'est moi qui l'ai tué. You may arrest me, I was the one who killed her. One interpretation could see Don José as an upright man who Carmen brings down through her seductive power. Another interpretation reveals the character of Don José as being unsure of its destiny and unable to choose what is right in the final round when all of the cards are laid down. From her first entrance, Carmen reveals her views about love in the chorus of her famous habanera, delivered over a repeated, undulating bass line that intertwines with her curvaceous vocal melody. Her message snakes its way through her enticing music. And this is our St. Louis native Grace Bumbry, in her 20s. Carmen is honest about her intentions and stays true to them throughout the opera. To look at Carmen as a love story promises disappointment, but to think about the opera as a story that explores many aspects of love filtered through gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic conditions, and definitions of nation provides more instruction. Carmen presents herself in song rather than a regular voice that matches the other characters. Hence, her voice is perceived in a special way on stage, as well as by those of us in the audience. Her use of song is strategic because she sings things she cannot or chooses not to say. In the habanera, she is able to present herself as a so-called gypsy performer. In this role, she is expected to exist on the margins of society and be able to spontaneously break into song. In this marginal identity, she also is able to reveal herself as a potential lover to the full village in a way that would be too licentious in a spoken context. A little later in Act 1, after mayhem breaks out in the cigarette factory, Carmen does not give Zuniga spoken answers when he questions her about her role in the disorder. Instead, she responds to him in a sing-song tra-la-la-la-la-la-la as she refuses to recognize his authority or implicate herself in his interrogation. Later, when she is held in jail, she pointedly sings to seduce Don José to get what she desires. She whispers a lilting melody that eventually erupts into the gyrating rhythmic seguidilla that outlines how she yearns to meet him at Lilas Pastias, drink manzanilla, dance the seguidilla, and show him le vrai plaisir sans fadeux, the real pleasures that are for two. Act 2 opens at Lilas Pastias Tavern, where Carmen leads a full-blown chanson bohémienne, or bohemian song, which accelerates into a rollicking dance number. Complete with added dancers and brilliant costumes, Carmen very publicly engages those on stage in the tavern as everyone gets caught up in the repetitive music that accelerates to a frenzied presto tempo. Though Carmen has been seducing those on stage since her first entrance, this number is specifically geared toward those of us watching her in the theater. We had witnessed her abilities in Act 1, but this is the first time she directs her seductive powers outward to the audience. With the driving rhythm and onstage dancing bodies, we are also caught up in the fervor and are aroused. This number rarely fails to get an impassioned ovation. In a microcosm of the main themes of the opera, the fortune-telling trio in Act 3 provides a view into what is at stake and foretells how things will work out. With characteristically bright and sparkly music reminiscent of the playful music of the Smugglers Quintet in Act 2, Frasquita and Mercedes read their fortune in the cards and see just what they want: romantic love and wealth without obligation. The mood drastically changes when Carmen begins to read her own fortune: death for both her and José. The contrapuntal juxtaposition of Carmen's stark lament and her girlfriend's bubbling refrain illustrates how Carmen has now entered her own sonic and emotional zone. She was never part of respectable society, and she now no longer fits within the world of the 19th century image of the gypsies. In an especially effective setting, Bizet contrasts two near homophones in French, l'amour, love, and la mort, death, as Carmen accepts her fate, which becomes so tightly intertwined with both love and death. Throughout Mérimée novella, the plot is told by the French male narrator and Don José. Rarely does Carmen even speak, though she is described in rich detail by the two men who are fascinated and entranced by her. A critical feature of Bizet's opera is that we finally get to hear Carmen's voice as she speaks for herself and is given a full musical portrayal. For Bizet's earliest audiences, her brazen character was beyond the conventions of the family-oriented opera comique theater. However, the opera caught on in its revised version within months of its premiere and has remained popular ever since. There seems to be something almost universal in the timelessness of this opera. Multiple adaptations and new productions of Carmen continue to be regularly performed all over the world. Some have estimated the number of adaptations to exceed 75, and there are books devoted to discussing multiple versions and iterations of the Carmen story on stage and in film. This ends my direct quoting from the Andre book. I encourage you to read Dr. Andre's book, Black Opera, History, Power, Engagement, for her discussion of three versions of the story: Carmen Jones, Carmen a hip opera, and South African Carmen, U Carmen a Khayelitsha. Opera Theater's setting is in Franco's Spain. They promise to present a Carmen sung by mezzo-soprano Sarah Mesco to be an independent woman well aware of the implications of her life choices. Here's the full cast and conductor and stage director. Opera Theater of St. Louis is committed to expanding the opera world to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and to that end is mindful in its casting of singers regarding BIPOC communities. Flagship programs include the Jardine Young Artist Program, the Bayer Fund Artist in Training Program for high school students, and the New Works Bold Voices Program. In addition, in its second year, the Clayco Future Leaders Fellowship supports and cultivates future arts leaders and administrators from backgrounds historically underrepresented in opera and arts administration, particularly those who identify as BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, or persons of color. Launched in 2021, this program provides in-depth experiences that advance the skills, knowledge, and capabilities that make these careers possible. Fellows serve in a full-time position specializing in one area while gaining knowledge in a range of essential functions across the organization, including artistic administration, fundraising, marketing, audience cultivation, and business administration. Details of all these programs can be found on the Opera Theater website at www.opera-stl.org. All three of the 2021 cohort were immediately hired by major national opera companies, and we look forward to our 2022 cohort having similar success. We are very excited about this season, which includes two world premieres, Awakenings and Harvey Milk, which you've already heard talked about at U City Library, and invite you to attend as many performances as possible. Enjoy a picnic in the beautiful garden space and meet the artists under the big tent after each performance. So thank you very much for attending today. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you, Diane. That is absolutely wonderful. A great presentation. Um, We will be having a docent, I'm not sure if it is you or if it's someone else, who will be talking about the magic flute on the 18th. Um,
It's someone else.
Someone else? Okay. So we will have another presentation about the magic flute on May 18th. So I encourage you to attend that as well. That is going to be the same link that you used for tonight's program. Um, does anyone have any questions for Diane? I have one if nobody else wants to start. So you mentioned, and I wasn't familiar with the novella that this was based on. You mentioned that that was all from the male point of view. Do do we have any is there any research or inkling as to why Carmen was like so much of that was given to Carmen's point of view in the actual opera?
Well, I think that was very much up to Bizet and his librettists, and they, as I said, he was really stepping out of the box. He was, thinking outside the box of expectations, even for his time, and so. Speaking of a woman, giving this from the woman's standpoint seemed to be the logical thing to do, I think, to him. And this kind of led into the trend with Puccini and all of his female leads, stories from the female standpoint mainly. So it was Bizet was starting that trend, I would say.
Great, thank you. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask.
I do encourage you to look for the Andre book, Black Opera. She discusses, it's a really interesting book because all of the operas that she discusses are actually by white composers, but they're operas that have been entry points for a lot of black singers, and they've been she does an extensive discussion of Porgy and Bess, as well as her discussion of Carmen. And so it's kind of eye-opening, coming from her viewpoint of gender within the context of the culture of the time, and then as it relates to today's gender politics kind of thing.
I just checked to see, and we do not have it in our catalog, so I'm going to have to see if I can track that one down.
Excellent. That's great. The Blyler book is really wonderful too. I'm not sure if it's still published. It was published initially in the 70s, but it is a really wonderful discussion of the milieu from Bizet's time. You could just feel yourself in the location reading her descriptions of it. Well, I guess if there are no questions, thank you again for attending, and I hope that you'll attend some of the operas at Opera Theater. They also are doing the center stage concert, which features their Jardine Young Artists, and they're doing a concert in partnership with Jazz St. Louis at the Grandel Theater. That's on June 7th. That's a free concert in honor of Black Music Month, and that will be curated by one of the artists singing in Awakenings, Adrian Dandridge. So that will prove to be very interesting. It's a 7:30 concert on June 7th, if you're in the area.
That's great. I am going to stop sharing your screen, Diane.
Okay.
And before everyone goes, I just wanted to, as you know, we're coming up on summer reading time at University City Public Library. And this year we're not doing the big book that we've done in the past, in part due to um, our renovations and everything that's going on. But I did want to let everyone know that we will be diving into Secrets of the Deep this summer. We're tying together our 3 monthly book groups with dual themes of secrecy and the ocean, which might sound like they don't have a lot in common, but they do. And we'll kick that off with a keynote presentation by a an associate professor of English at UC Santa Barbara, Melody Jew, who studies diving and fiction, and she has a wonderful presentation that we're really looking forward to. We'll also have an author visit from um, the award-winning and award-nominated author Disha Filia, who wrote The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. She'll be um, visiting us online in um, in late June, and then we'll also be doing an in-person event finally in early August. We'll have an outdoor movie night. This is in addition to 9, count 'em, 9 book group discussions that we will be having throughout the summer. Those will be covering contemporary fiction, contemporary nonfiction, historical fiction and historical nonfiction, and then some contemporary science fiction and fantasy novels, all of which cover um, our our themes. So please visit our adult summer reading page, and there is an RSVP form that would ask you to fill out if you're interested in participating. If you have gotten emails from us in the past, you will probably be getting an email um, for the adult summer reading on Friday. And we're really looking forward to the summer. So um, thank you again, Diane, for this wonderful presentation. And yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Kara, would you be able to monitor numbers for me for the YouTube and Facebook?
Yes, I
Maybe
can
send,
definitely do that.
okay, maybe